12th.
Your last year? Was it bad? Was it good? Was it mixed? On a macro level, meaning at the high level, at the 20,000 feet level, last year, 2020, was pretty bad. We had the plague, COVID-19, a lot of unemployment. We learned some new letters, WFH, work from home. We learned one of my least favorite four-letter words, Zoom. We worried about loved ones going into work every day. We learned that Black and brown bodies continue to be killed within our system based on white supremacy. The first week of this year hasn't been so great either, frankly. On the micro level, at the personal and family level, this year was kind of a mixed bag. I'm sure all of us had some hopeful things and some joyful things, and we also had some things that were rough for us. So let me share with you just some personal things that happened in my own family, and I hope that will help you remember some of the beautiful things that happened in your own family. In our family, we celebrated the wedding of our son in April, which brought a lot of blessings with it. Brought a daughter-in-law whom we fallen in love with. It brought us a bonus granddaughter, which is always a blessing. And it brought us a son who's happier than we've seen him in a really long time. And they were married in April, and there were just 7 of us there. And we were kind of at the beginning of being nervous about COVID. So they married here at our house. We have a little summer house outside. And it's inside, but it's outside of our house. And they were married in there. There was just her parents, us, and the wedding couple and Jen's daughter. And as I said, that was in April. And the good news of that whole thing is that we're expecting a new grandson in March. So we're all excited about that. So that was great news, all of it. On the kind of more, there's some good news and some bad news sort of side. I personally, at the sort of super micro level, I personally got a cancer diagnosis at the beginning of the year, which was a little muddled. And the reason it was a little muddled wasn't because of the diagnosis. It's that because of when it happened, I was not able to have surgery right away. And so that was put off. And any of you have had any kind of diagnosis like that know how troubling that can be. I did eventually, it was closed, the surgery center was closed because of COVID, of course. They did eventually open it back up, and I had my surgery. And just 2 weeks ago, I got the all clear. So I've had my follow-up tests, and doctors never say you have the all clear. They say that as far as we can tell, there's no cancer within your body, and I'm taking that as an all clear. So for me personally, that's been, I feel a bit of a weight has lifted from my shoulders. And I feel a little bit like the story of Isaiah is kind of, the story in Isaiah is kind of like that. So the particular story that we're reading today, the pericope that we had today, is in chapter 60, which is in that third section of Isaiah, what some people call Isaiah 3. And part of the interesting thing about that is that for 3 chapters in Isaiah, the ones before the one that we read, they're kind of, I think what I would call, I think I have in my notes, complainy pants chapters. And so they're not exactly complainy pants chapters, because the complainy pants chapters actually come in chapters 64 and 65. But what happens in the 3 before, in 56 to 59, or I guess the 4 before, is that they're really more like, man, oh man, did we goof up and make God mad chapters. And so occasionally you hear a voice from the narrator's voice says they did terrible things. And more often the narrator's voice says, we goofed up and we're sorry. And sometimes it's a those guys, and sometimes it's an us guys. And that certainly kind of resonated with me a little bit. So we get to chapter 60, and even the next couple of chapters after that, about which I'm not going to speak, there's finally some hope. And we're thinking about, I wish Dr. O'Brien was here. She'd be so proud of me talking about what's going on behind the scenes. But um, we're finally getting some good news. So the people of the time, this is in the time um, after uh, Babylon has taken over Judah, and then after Cyrus the Great and the Persian Empire has moved in. And Cyrus actually, has taken over most of the ancient Near East and Western Asia and Central Asia, the kind of the whole Saudi Arabian peninsula and that part of Asia that today we call the Uncle Stans, all of the Afghanistan, Pakistan, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, I call them the Uncle Stans. So the whole of all of that. And Cyrus has encouraged the people of um, the former Judah, which is Yehud now, to really to rebuild what they had, because he knows that everybody being prosperous is good for him. So he encourages them to be prosperous. And so we kind of come into this story. I say that as background to come into this story. And this story is really about this wonderful um, image that's used throughout this poem of light. And so we look and we see all of these images of light. Shine, for your light has come. Nations come to your light. Kings to the brightness of your dawn. See and be radiant. So there's lots of images of light in the beginning of this poem, and it's really quite beautiful. So while darkness will cover the people, the Lord, the light, will rise upon you. And I think that's what we're hoping for, at least in the new year. That's what I'm hoping for. I was so disappointed this week, and I have to confess that I almost threw this whole sermon away about 2:30 this morning when I was sort of praying about this a little bit and thought maybe I should talk about what happened on Wednesday. I'm not sure. Um, but I decided that we still need to have hope. And so that's kind of where I'm going. Where is this hope, and where are we going to find this hope? I think we're hoping, as we see the rollout of the vaccine, that things will get somewhat back to normal. So in my family, um, my husband works in a hospital. He works with COVID patients every day. And so he's had his first vaccine, and he'll have his second dose in another week and a half or so. Um, my older daughter works in a hospital, and as she worked in the emergency room a month or so ago, she got COVID. And unfortunately, she brought it home to her family. So my son-in-law and my two grandchildren also got COVID. Thankfully, they were all fine and came through it fine. They quarantined, and um, they were good. It was a very mild, they showed very mild symptoms, which was very wonderful. And I don't want anyone at all to hear that and say, well, it's mostly okay. No, it's still killing people, and you still need to be careful. But um, in our family, it has been a different, we've experienced that it can be pretty mild. I think even as people, as all of us continue to get our vaccines and the vaccine gets rolled out, we're probably not going to go back to normal, whatever that means. And in a lot of ways, I hope we don't. I think we're going to have a new normal. And we've heard that term a lot. This is our new normal. But I don't know that we know what that looks like yet. And but I think we'll get back to closer to what we're used to anyway. And I'm not sure what normal is anyway. My brother is fond of saying that normal is just a setting on the dryer. And so I'm kind of in agreement with him about that. There's a normal for each of us. And it's, it, there really isn't a normal. I think one of the things that that's gonna happen in 2021, that especially as people who are preparing to be ministers or who already are ministers, I hope we pay attention to. I think there's gonna be a lot of grief to process this year. We've experienced a lot of grief in the last year. Um, we're up to, according to the site that I looked at yesterday anyway, over 378,000 deaths in the United States. We're at almost 2 million deaths worldwide. And for my experience is only here, so I can't speak of how it is in other places. But here, I know when I have gone to a couple of funerals this year, people have not had the chance to grieve that they've really needed. People have died alone and they've been grieving for the most part alone. Certainly not in the nice, big, comfortable family groupings that we're used to. We're used to sitting around, having meals, having all the food that's been sent by your church family, and telling stories of the loved one who's passed, and laughing and crying and all those things. And I think a lot of that has not been able to happen. And we're going to have to do that this year. We're going to have to sort of process what we've had. So we're going to have to figure out a way to manage our own stress. We're going to have to figure out a way to make meaning out of what's happened. That's what we always have to do. And then, is there a way to take action? I think if we keep those three things sort of in the back of our minds about what we're doing, that will help a lot. I did want to point out one little part of this reading that has always been slightly troubling to me, and that is just that I think this particular reading can be taken very, I'll call it prosperity gospelish. So you come to close to the bottom and it says, the abundance of the sea shall be brought to you. That sounds like a good thing, unless you've just had a flood. And the wealth of the nations shall come to you. And so it can sound like what we're really looking for here is send me the money. And even probably the best known thing about uh, capitalism, best known work of capitalism is Wealth of Nations by Adam Smith. Um, and so as you think about who sort of codified how to make money better. And so as you think about that, that kind of, is this what really God, if I do what God tells me to do, am I going to get rich? Is this going to help me materially? Is this going to help me in my financial life? And that is not at all the intention of this. Um, First and foremost, as Christians, we don't think that what we do gives us anything, right? We do these good things out of our gratitude for the abundance that we have. Um, we have justification by faith. And so as we have justification by faith, we can think about what can we do to help others? And we don't have to worry so much about all of this sort of, we're not stuck in this material. We live in a material world, don't get me wrong, but we don't need to worry about, are we wealthy or aren't we wealthy? We don't need, $10 million homes. We don't need four jets. We just need to make sure our brothers and sisters have enough and that we have enough to eat. And That's really kind of where we are. So, why does all this matter in a lot of ways? Our light has already come. Just like the Magi who followed the cosmic light, who followed perhaps um, the convergence of the same two planets that we've been able to see recently, Saturn and Jupiter. Maybe it was a star, maybe it was a planetary convergence. I'm sure in 400 BCE we had no idea what we were looking at. It was just the bright shiny thing in the sky, and frankly in 2021 it's just the bright shiny thing in the sky to me sometimes. Can we plug into that source of light? That is a cosmic Christ that we have access to all the time. And is is that light shining within us so that everyone can see that that's what it is? So I'll send you kind of off with the message to keep your own sort of spiritual batteries charged. So God is in every fiber of your being, in every breath that you take. But you still need to acknowledge that God is there, and you still need to be in tune and in touch with that. So please continue to read scripture, continue to pray, continue to find God in the center of yourself, and make sure you center yourself on God so that you can bring that to others. I can always tell when I'm feeling off center because I know that I'm feeling anxious or afraid or angry. And I don't mean to say that you can't be centered and feel those things, because you can. It makes me very sad to hear people say that, I'm feeling afraid. Oh, well, then you should pray a little harder. That's not the deal. You're a human being with emotions, and sometimes you're afraid, and sometimes you're scared, and sometimes you're angry. But I know that if I'm feeling extra something, extra, this week it's been anger, so that's the one I sort of glommed onto, that I'm not feeling centered. And so, what is it that's not centered in my life? Have I have I have I continued to build my relationship on a personal level with God? Have I continued to nurture that relationship? So stay plugged in so that you can do the hard and the wonderful work that God is calling you to. Amen.